I uncovered my wife's betrayal when my stepchildren told me to relax, as I wasn't their biological father. That moment shattered me. I ended up divorcing her and leaving them with nothing. My heart felt burdened, and my eyes were swollen with tears. I had always believed in the sacredness of marriage. When I married Susan 5 years ago, I didn't just marry her. I embraced her children, Jake and Emma, as well. At that time, they were 10 and 8 years old, and their biological father had long been absent from their lives. I willingly stepped into that role because I loved Susan and wanted to give her kids the life they deserved. I attended soccer games, helped with science projects, and made Christmases unforgettable. Being a stepdad wasn't always easy. There were moments when they reminded me that I wasn't their real dad, especially when I set rules or declined unreasonable requests. But I believed they were just kids and that, eventually, they'd understand. Then came the betrayal. At first, it started with small things. Susan began staying late at work more often. Her phone was always in her hand, and she laughed at messages she wouldn't share with me. One night, I did something I had never done before. I checked her phone while she was in the shower. What I found was devastating. Explicit messages and photos exchanged with her coworker. My stomach sank, and the world around me seemed to crumble. I confronted her immediately, and instead of apologizing, she blamed me for being too controlling. She argued that this wouldn't have happened if I had made her feel desired. It was the ultimate betrayal. I had given everything, my time, love, and resources, only to be repaid with this. A few days later, I sat down with Jake and Emma to tell them that Susan and I were getting a divorce. I expected them to be upset, maybe even cry, but instead, Jake simply shrugged and said, "Whatever. You're not our real dad anyway." Emma added, "Yeah, you should just relax. Mom says you're overreacting." That was the final straw. The next day, I filed for divorce. Thankfully, I had a solid prenup in place. Everything I had brought into the marriage, my house, my savings, my car, was mine. Susan had always treated the prenup as a formality, something we'd never need. But in the end, it was the smartest decision I ever made. During the divorce proceedings, Susan demanded that I continue supporting her kids financially. I calmly reminded the court that they had a father and that I wasn't legally obligated to support children who openly disrespected me and denied my role as their dad. The judge agreed, and the look on Susan's face when she realized she wouldn't get a penny was priceless. She would have to move out, find a job, and explain to Jake and Emma why their comfortable life was about to end. The day they moved out was surreal. The house felt empty, but for the first time in years, there was peace. I began rediscovering old hobbies, woodworking, hiking, and even taking a few cooking classes. I reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from during the marriage. About 6 months later, I received a call from Susan. She was crying, telling me how difficult life had become for her and the kids. They had moved into a small apartment. Jake had started acting out at school, and Emma was angry all the time. She begged me for help. "You made your bed," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Now you have to lie in it." She tried to guilt-trip me, claiming the kids miss me, but I knew better. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided, and I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. A year later, I heard through mutual friends that Susan's affair had ended in disappointment. Her co-worker had left her as soon as the divorce was finalized. She was now working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and the perfect image she once had was shattered. Meanwhile, I was flourishing, happier and more at peace than I had been in years. Eventually, I met someone new, a woman who appreciated me for who I was, not just for what I could provide. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in a long while, I feel genuinely happy. As for Jake and Emma, I sincerely hope they're doing well. After all, they're just children, and their mother's actions were not their fault. But through all of this, I've learned an important lesson. Respect must be earned, not given, and family is not defined solely by blood. When people ask if I regret walking away, My answer is always the same. Never, not for a single moment. Over time, I realized something vital. Holding on to anger and bitterness only drags you down. Susan and her children were a chapter in my life, but they did not define who I am. I chose to focus on what I could control. My own happiness, my future, and the relationships that truly mattered. Lily, my new partner, has been a breath of fresh air. She embraced my past without judgment, and together we've built something based on mutual respect and shared goals. Lily also has a son, Ryan, from a previous relationship. This time, I approached things differently. I made sure to establish clear boundaries and took my time getting to know him. Ryan is a wonderful kid, polite, curious, and full of humor. In many ways, he reminded me of why I had once wanted to be a father figure. He didn't see me as a substitute for his biological father, and I never tried to be. Instead, we bonded over simple things like building model airplanes and watching Saturday morning cartoons together. Then, about 2 years after the divorce, I ran into Jake and Emma at a local grocery store. They were taller now, more mature, but there was a noticeable weariness in their eyes. Jake, who had always been the more outspoken one, hesitated before offering a quick greeting. It threw me off guard, but I smiled and asked how they were. Jake looked down, his feet shuffling nervously. "Mom's having a tough time," he muttered. Emma, standing beside him, added, "We miss how things used to be." For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. These kids weren't to blame for their mother's choices. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't open that door again. "I hope things get better for you," I said gently but firmly. "Take care of yourselves." They nodded silently and walked away. I could feel their eyes on me as I turned down another aisle. It wasn't closure in the traditional sense, but it was enough to help me release any lingering guilt. Fast forward to today, and I can honestly say my life has never been better. Lily and I got married last year in a small, intimate ceremony. Ryan was my best man, and I was surrounded by my closest friends. Recently, we bought a cozy house on the outskirts of town, complete with a spacious yard and a workshop where I've been crafting furniture in my free time. Ryan often helps me, and I've been teaching him how to use the tools safely. It's become our thing, a way to bond and create something meaningful together. Sometimes, I think back on the life I left behind, not with regret, but with gratitude for the lessons it taught me. That chapter showed me the importance of self-respect, of not settling for less than I deserve, and of finding joy in the right places. The story of Susan and her children is one I rarely tell, but when I do, it serves as a reminder of how far I've come. Life has a strange way of teaching you lessons you never expected. Sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But if you're willing to walk away from the pain, something better might be waiting for you on the other side. I didn't just survive the betrayal. I thrived because of it. And for me, that's the ultimate revenge.